Live from Johannesburg, this is Tonight with Jane Dutton. Can the DA do it? With national elections next year, we ask Solly Malatsi if the party has what it takes to win seats. Goodbye cash, hello cryptocurrency. We debate if Bitcoin is here to stay. And Trump tweets himself into hot water again. We'll have the latest from Washington on Tonight with Jane Dutton. Divisions over policy and multiple mayors with crises. Is the DA an opposition party in shambles ahead of next year's national election? That's my question for Democratic Alliance spokesperson Solly Malatsi. What's yours? Send us your tweets on hashtag Tonight with Jane Dutton. Our call lines are also open, but first we head over to Shahan with the news. Shahan.
All right, thanks for that, Jane. Appreciate it. Our top stories tonight. The Cooperative Governance Ministry is on a drive to fix failing municipalities. A team of technical experts has been deployed to 55 struggling municipalities. They'll help with infrastructure, management and other problems.
The situation in the country has been such that only 55 municipalities out of 257 had engineers leading their technical divisions. I made a commitment that COGTA would, through our implementing agent, the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agent, MISA, urgently support 55 struggling municipalities to spend their infrastructure allocation. I said we would deploy district technical support teams in the affected municipalities. We have established the district technical support teams and have appointed engineers and town planners who have been deployed into the municipalities in the 9 provinces. It is my great pleasure to warmly welcome to COGTA 81 new engineers and town planners that we have thus far appointed.
Well, the Kruger municipality is implementing water cuts in drought-stricken parts of the Eastern Cape. Levels at the local dam has dropped to below 7%. Some residents could be left without water if there's no rainfall in the next 3 months. Farmers say their water allocation has been cut by 80%.
We as black farmers now, it's even getting worse because you must borrow money from the bank to do that, and the cost of that, it's almost 1,000 a meter to dig a borehole. So it's not so easy for us, and I mean you need a security to get a loan from the bank. Yeah, but we've tried different sources.
And the standoff between the Western Cape government and the taxi industry continues. Many commuters have been left stranded. 2 buses and a truck were torched in Khayelitsha today. Taxi associations deny they're behind it. The Western Cape Transport MEC says they've done all they can to avoid strike action.
Strike has taken place this morning. We are still appealing to this breakaway task team to call off the strike so that the commuters are not prejudiced. And also this morning I've been informed that 2 GABS buses have been burnt and that there's been intimidation at a number of the ranks. And we are not going to flinch on this matter. We as government are going to pursue our rights against all and sundry who have perpetrated this strike and hold them accountable for their actions in due course.
All right, those are the headlines. Back to Jane.
Thanks very much for that, Shahan. After the break, we talk to the DA's national spokesperson, Solly Malatsi. Do stay with us.
If you're living with HIV, then please pay careful attention. Did you know you could get up to 10 million rand life cover through All Life, the leaders in life insurance for people living with HIV? It's for men and women aged 18 to 59. Cover starts immediately, and for very little extra, you can choose to receive a lump sum cash if you are disabled or unable to work. SMS LIVING to 45863 or call now. Your confidentiality is guaranteed, and it's more affordable than you think. Remember, life cover gets more expensive as you get older. Your premium will never be lower than it is today. Join the thousands of people who've already chosen this cover SMS LIVING to 45863 or call now. Do it for you. Do it for your family. All Life is underwritten by Centric Life Insurance Company Limited. T's and C's apply. All Life. Cover for the living.
A high-level resignation and confusion over the stance on BEE. Just what is happening within the Democratic Alliance? It controls the Western Cape, so how are they managing the province plagued by widespread arson, fatal drugs and increasingly violent gangs? And how is the party's policies evolving ahead of next year's vote? Joining me to discuss the party's future is National Spokesperson Solly Malatsi. It's very good to have you with us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's start off with Patricia de Lille.
Yep.
The charges have been dropped against her.
Yeah.
Why?
Look, I mean, from the onset, the intention was to always, how do we best find a way that resolves the impasse so that it's not as protected as, it unfolded. And there was a realization on both sides that we need to prioritize the people who put us into government, and those are the people of Cape Town, and that this protracted impasse was becoming a sideshow for what we were voted into. And part of that discussion, as events evolved over the last few months and the last few weeks, culminated in the agreement that saw the mayor and our leader, Mmusi Maimane, on Sunday announcing that the mayor will step down by the end of October. And as part of that agreement, that the party's internal processes, which were going to unfold with regards to those issues that were raised concerning her leadership and the political management of the caucus, will then be withdrawn so that we can close this chapter.
Do you think the party was possibly also a little scared of what might have come out of this, because the public would have been fully aware of the dialogue that happened?
I don't think so at all. I mean, the party consented to the mayor's insistence that, we grant her a public hearing, and that was granted in the agreement that was announced over 10 days ago. But subsequent to that, there have been, ongoing talks about this. And this is what we are dealing with. We are dealing with the fact that we have moved towards a conclusion to this. And it was a difficult and unique circumstance.
I mean, she was really reluctant to go. She was going to fight her corner. She wanted to fight her innocence. That's what she told us here. So I'm just wondering what sort of deal you came up with her in order for her to finally realize that possibly for the future of the party, she needs to go.
I can only talk about, the party stance, and the mayor is more than eloquent to articulate her,
Was there a deal
reasons.
on board, though?
Part of the agreement is that, she steps down, which is what, has been announced. And what comes with that was those processes, because it would become futile to then proceed with them because they relate to her mayoralty. To proceed with them beyond her tenure will just be futile. So,
but don't you think the audience, the public, the DA supporters should know what went down? I mean, now it might all be swept under the carpet and it'll never come out. Isn't that important?
I think, the phrase swept under the carpet is a little unfortunate to characterize how this evolved. The reality of the situation that in any political climate, when political problems arise, you're always looking at what are the best possible avenues to resolve them. We had a situation wherein we were going to initiate disciplinary processes, and you've followed the case, the history of the case is that, some of the issues related to the case were then taken to court. We corrected some of those issues in terms of the composition of the FLC, and there was a separate process to that, which we then are appealing in terms of the implication it has on past rulings of the FLC. And also, I mean, you highlight the fact that, the mayor had indicated how she wants this to happen in public. We ultimately consented to that as part of the agreement, because when you're dealing with a political situation, you're also constantly engaging each other so that you enter into a terrain that you're both on the same ground in order to get the best outcome. I think what we've been able to resolve here is a very delicate political situation.
I mean, obviously something had to be resolved. So can I just remind the viewers that they can call in or tweet us if you've got any questions for Solly Malatsi, and I'm sure you'd be happy to answer them. All right, so obviously something needed to be done. Whether this is going to work or not, it'll soon be unveiled. What happens next to her now? Because, I mean, she had her supporters. She had many supporters, and she did good things. She had her failings. She did some good things as a mayor.
Yeah,
so where does it leave her next and the party and the divisions within the party?
I mean, and this is the important part now, that even the announcement of a last day of office, for instance, you know, we're having this 2 months now, and this is an opportunity for the caucus in there to also refocus on the jobs that they were elected in, and so that we can ensure that whoever her successor is, there is a stable leadership there, there's stable political management there, so that there's no disruption of service delivery and governance, you know, and everyone associated with the party who has the best interest of the party realizes that now we have to dedicate our energy in terms of uniting the caucus in the city.
Who's going to do that? Who do you think the best man, woman is for the job to do that?
I mean, it would be very unfortunate of me to preempt or express, you know, preference of one particular individual.
But any names bobbing out there that we should be looking at?
We've got enough talent to produce a capable mayor to succeed the mayor of Cape Town. And we believe that, you know, given what our program of governance is, they will be able to, you know, elevate the performance of the city of Cape Town. And amongst that caucus, there are people who have been, you know, in the city of Cape Town for a prolonged period, who have been part of government and making in there. And the best talents will rise and they will, you know, succeed the mayor.
And any idea where she's going to go? We know that she's flirted, or the ANC and the EFF have flirted with her. Any suggestions?
What I do know is that she's still a DA member as of now. As to what happens next, the mayor is more than eloquent to speak for herself.
All right, let's talk about what happened as far as BEE is concerned, and the fact that the party has dumped it. Why?
Look, I think there is a realization in the party that the implementation of the ANC's version of black economic empowerment hasn't gone deep enough in order to address the inequalities that still exist in society, but more so to benefit the majority of the disadvantaged people in our country, which are mainly black people, women and disabled people. So what the Federal Council of the DA agreed on an alternative set of proposals that will advance economic inclusion to make sure that we empower black people more. And we do not believe that the ANC's version is the right way to go around that. That is why, you know, as part of our preparations going forward to the next election, we have initiated a process of, you know, policy reformulation.
I mean, wasn't the problem, sorry, with BEE more how it was implemented rather than the ideals behind it? I mean, the fact it was so open to corruption and a few people benefited rather than the masses.
I mean, the implementation of it, you know, can't be divorced from, you know, the conceptualization of it and to how it's being framed. The reality of the situation is the ANC's version has been more elite enrichment, and that doesn't benefit the majority of the population who need the empowerment so much. I mean, unemployment in the country is continuing to rise, you know, the cost of living is continuing to rise, and the worst affected people in this remains mainly poor black people.
But, I mean, are you targeting poor black people here? I've got your list of what it is that you want to do, and basically you've got 4 points, haven't you? You are asking for a contributory pension. Who puts that money in? I mean, what if you don't have much money? How do you put money into that pension? Where does that money come from?
I think what we are looking at, we are not looking at one particular model. We are looking at various models, and it's in still very early stages. And that is why the point of departure from our Federal Council was an agreement on the broader alternative approach of what our economic offer would be going into this election. So at this stage, we are not fixated as to one particular model. We're going to explore various options that...
Yeah, but doesn't something like that put people off, considering, as you said earlier, the price of petrol has gone up, food, you know, people are spending more and getting less from it. So if they're going to be penalized by putting money into a pension, you said you'd lower the tax for those who support adult non-taxpayers. What about those not supporting any taxpayers? I mean, how come you differentiating like that?
I think what we need to establish is we're not looking at one particular intervention as the panacea for the challenges that we face as a country economically. What we're looking at is, out of the various options that have been even presented by various organizations, and the critique to BEE is, how do we best ensure that we push empowerment of black people to the extent that it, you know, liberates them out of the misery of unemployment, out of the misery of poverty, so that we can have a generation in society that is economically active.
All right. Where is this going to leave your relationship with the FF. I mean, you're already at loggerheads when it comes to land. You are in several coalitions together. What sort of impact is this going to have on them?
I mean, the reason we are different political parties is because, you know, at the core of it, we believe in fundamentally different things. There can be cooperation on strategic issues as and when they arise, and we'll deal with those, you know, going forward. When you go into an election, we don't go into an election with the hope that we will rely on other people to help us win. We go into election with the hope that our strength will carry us through the election and deliver us the mandate that, you know, the voters would have given us. And based on whatever the election results are and what that future entails, we will then explore what options we have in terms of is there prospects for, you know, coalitions with certain parties, because simply because we are opposition parties does not guarantee that we need to be in a coalition. There need to be principles and values that we agree on going into a coalition.
Well, that's always
and we have
the
simply
idea,
learned,
isn't it?
yeah, and we have learned, you know, very good lessons from our experience of how our coalitions have evolved.
I'm going to talk to you more about that, but
Sure.
let's bring in Ezram. He is on the line from Springs. Go ahead, Ezram.
Jane, you know, I've been looking at everything since it started with Patricia de Lille. It just proves that the EFL, the DA, is the same as the EFF and the ANC. They don't care nothing about the poor. All they care about is them making money for themselves. That's all there is to it. There's clearly corruption in the DA in Cape Town, but they've reached this deal that they've decided now they're going to reach, and they're hiding all that corruption. Patricia de Lille is corrupt. The DA and Musi and all of them, they're afraid of what she's going to say about them and bring out all the dirt that they're trying to hide. So basically, not voting next year. There's no party for me to vote for, actually.
Okay, Ezram, thank you very much. What do you make about the fact, you know, he said that possibly Patricia de Lille, we touched a little bit earlier on, might say things that would frighten those within the party, and that these parties, your parties, the other parties, are seen as corrupt and out of touch?
I mean, I'd say that is incorrect. And the difference between us and the other parties that he mentioned is when the allegations suffered, we initiated an internal party process to get to the bottom of it. And regardless of the prominence of the individual, their popularity or significance in the party, we initiated those processes in order to set up a process that would test the veracity of those allegations. And there were a lot of episodes and different captures. I mean, that is public knowledge as to what happened since, you know, those allegations were put forward. But we were always committed to a fair process, and that is why even after the ruling of the Cape High Court, when it concluded that we must reformulate the FLC, which is our disciplinary body, we were more than happy to do that, despite the fact that we had serious misgivings about that ruling and impact. And we've communicated on it. I don't think it happens to the extent that it does. And given the media interest in this case, we have been, you know, proactive in communicating and the constant update. And we haven't gone to the extent that we're going to guarantee a public disciplinary hearing in public. But as events, you know, change, you know, negotiations also change the direction that the leadership takes in resolving the political issues that are in there. And I think for...
Hold on, I'm going to jump in quickly because we've got another caller on the line. Alex from Pretoria. Go ahead, please.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, Alex. Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to find out, in case of the public hearing where Patricia de Lille initiated, what is it why DA was refusing? Was there anything that they are hiding in case of dealing with the matter of Patricia?
Thank you, Alex. I believe we have touched on this, but maybe you'd like to answer.
I mean, just to, you know, Ria said, I mean, there's this kind of obsession that what would have happened had the public hearing gone on. And
yeah, but they're all these allegations swirling around about somebody who's really important. We know about the divisions with the DA. People actually want to know what's going on. They want to be told, they want to hear, they want to know if you guys are clean, if you can be cleared.
Sure. And we would not have announced our commitment to a public hearing if we do not have confidence that whatever comes out of that process will be able to stand our ground firm in terms of, whatever it is. So right now we are speculating about what would have happened in a hearing that isn't taking place. And nobody exactly knows what would have done there, because we are not prophets.
Okay, let's go back to the BEE, the announcement. I mean, there really was a public falling out amongst party members of the DA on Twitter about the policy. Some saying this is going ahead, others saying this is not going ahead. I mean, talk about, airing your dirty laundry publicly, and what happened there? What went wrong?
I think what a lot of people are trying to adjust to is the fact that as we grow as an organization with more public labs, you're going to get an environment where robust debates take place even in the public space. And I don't think it's an unhealthy ingredient in a political spectrum. In fact, it speaks to the strength of the organization that members, whether they have different interpretations of what was agreed, can air their views and what they believe, it was their understanding of it. But we are. Can I
yes,
make this
go
point?
ahead.
Yeah, but in terms of what our position is, it's quite clear as to what was agreed out of Federal Council. It was agreed that we're going to go onto this process of formulating an alternative economic offer that will create jobs, that will ensure the empowerment of black people.
So I was going to, okay,
Sure.
There we go. Quickly before it goes. All right. So this is what we have. This is what I was referring to. And, healthy debate is always advisable, but it's more the fact that this happened so publicly, and it seems there's a lot of confusion within the DA. The DA is not resolved to abandon the BEE. That's Phumzile van Dam, and then, within minutes we get another tweet saying we did for Michael Walters, and then anyway, it goes on and on and on. And it's a very confusing message. It seems to indicate that this is a party in disarray.
None at all. I mean, just, over 2 hours ago, the party's federal chairperson, the party's head of policy, released a joint statement reaffirming what was agreed at Federal Council and what our stance is on triple BEE and what our economic offer or what we're going to work on in terms of the ingredients of our economic offer will be, and the broader framework. Everything else becomes a sideshow. At the end of the day, the leadership of the party have communicated what is the stance of Federal Council, and the action steps that we're going to take will be going into policy commissions that will each make a contribution towards our party's economic offer going to next year's elections.
All right, we've got another caller, Mike from Joburg. Go ahead, Mike.
Hi, I just want to find out I'd just like to find out, in terms of the black tax, how would they even start to regulate that? Because it sounds like a lot of hot air to me. And then the other question is on the Delil issue. Did the DA actually have evidence of any wrongdoing? And if they did, why would they drop the charges? Is the DA now promoting corruption in government?
Thank you, Mike.
I mean, two things. There's a process of the City of Cape Town that the council as an administration and arm of government will initiate, right? And there's a party process regarding the mayor, and that party process has been ongoing. When allegations emerge, what you need to do is you give the affected party an opportunity to respond to those allegations. And given their response, you are able to require additional responses from them and set up a process within the mechanisms that are there in the party so that you can test those allegations and evidence can be presented in there. We're in the process of doing that, but in the process of doing that, there was always conversation in the leadership about, can we find other ways of resolving this? And in a political...
Do you have evidence or don't you?
I mean, that was going to be presented before the hearing, which is now isn't taking place, and it becomes speculative to talk
yes
then
or no?
about... No, I don't think it's a yes or no question because we're not in a trial.
You've got evidence or you don't?
No, there were allegations. The evidence was going to be submitted during the hearing, and it can
So
only
you do
be
have some sort of
evidence
evidence?
that would have been presented during the hearing. Of course, it would have been, the party would not have proceeded without having evidence that it believes can be used in a hearing.
Then?
Sorry?
Shouldn't it go into the public domain?
And the parties agreed that the hearing shouldn't
that we
proceed.
shouldn't know, that the voters and the supporters shouldn't know.
No, it's not that, Jane. I mean, you know...
Okay, let's go on to black tax.
Yes.
what was your response to his question about...
I didn't quite get his question around black tax.
Well, I think there seems to be some sort of confusion about, I mean, what you're saying, you'd lower the tax, I touched on this a little bit earlier on, for those who support adult non-taxpayers. I mean, it seems to be a little bit confusion about who falls into this category.
I think it's about giving tax breaks to those that carry a more burden in terms of, contribution to their families, but also in society, so that there can be fairness, in society. And that is our interest, so that there can be fairness in taxing, but also lessen the burden on those that have little to provide for themselves and their families.
And how do you regulate that?
I mean, again, this process is at a stage where it doesn't have all the answers to every question. And the reason we are going into an extensive process of commission is to also find answers to some of the questions that we are grappling with at this stage.
Right, we've got another caller, Mpho from Rustenburg. Go ahead, Mpho.
Hi, I want to ask Mr. Malati, what is the DA's position on BEE and how does it differ from that of the ANC?
All right, thank you, Mpho. All right, so we've touched a little bit on BEE before, and I think he wants to ask you a little bit more about how you differ from ANC's stance here now.
I mean, there's a simple dichotomy between the two. Ours is about more economic inclusion, so that the disadvantaged in society, black, women, and disadvantaged have more opportunities have more economic opportunities so that they can improve their living conditions. And the ANC's one has been targeted at elites. It's been elite empowerment. Okay. The very simplistic dichotomy.
Is this to attract the coloured voter?
Why would you think so?
Because traditionally they don't favour the BEE policy, whereas obviously the EFF does. So is this part of your election strategy?
It's our economic offer to all South Africans who care about the future of this country and the fact that economically a lot of South Africans remain outside of economic opportunities. It's about how to ensure that we break barriers that still keep many young people in unemployment, many women in unemployment. So it's not about preference of one section of society, but it's about making sure that how do we create sufficient opportunities so that the millions of unemployed black people and poor people have those opportunities that they can, have a stake in the future of this country.
Okay, let's carry on then with looking forward to the elections.
Yeah.
And I'm still wondering where this change of policy, dumping the BEE, will leave you and your relationship with the EFF. Can you still rely on them now? I mean, there's been quite a bit of talk recently that they would start walking away from their relationship with you, especially considering what's happening in Nelson Mandela Bay.
I mean, we are not religiously attached to governance in coalitions. We believe that there are a set of values.
Yeah, but you need them.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point. We believe that when we entered into these coalitions with all the coalition partners, there were fundamental issues that we agreed on good governance, on delivery, and that we need to remain steadfast on those. We cannot be part of a project that racially polarizes South Africa. And if it means that we lose some of our governments simply because we want one South Africa for all that is united, so be the case, because we will continue to exist beyond a tenure of, beyond one tenure in one particular municipality. We've shown that where we can govern on our own, we're able to deliver the highest levels of basic delivery and good administrations. In terms of the future of coalitions going forward, elections determine those things in terms of where are the prospects of coalitions.
Okay, but I mean, you focus a lot on attacking the ANC when they've made a mistake and riding on the coattails of EFF. So again, going forward, your policy for your election?
It does not mean that simply because we are in a coalition with the EFF or the UDM, we cannot air the differences that we have ideologically and policy-wise with them. A coalition is not a ticket to do nothing, say nothing, when your coalition partners differ with you ideologically. And that is a common understanding across all the coalition partners.
I mean, what sort of... Okay, sorry, carry on. Oh, I thought we had another caller on the line. No, we don't. All right. Okay. So are you prepared to walk away from that relationship, or are you ready to absorb the impact of that relationship breaking with the EFF?
We are not prepared to compromise our values just to stay in government. If it means that we have to lose government because we remain loyal to our values that our voters voted us into, we will, at the next opportunity of an election, make sure that we work hard to govern on our own way it's possible.
All right. So the elections going forward, you're very confident, though you've had several problems when it comes to your mayors. Look at what's happening in Nelson Mandela Bay and the lack of support for the mayor there, like Patricia de Lille. He also survived several no-confidence votes. What's going to happen to him? Is he detrimental to the party? Is it time for change there?
Where?
In Nelson Mandela Bay.
We've got full confidence in the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay. In fact, what the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay has done and achieved in turning around that administration is incredible. And anyone who is part of a project to oust him out of power simply because of a racially motivated attack in the mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, then wants to return power to those that destroyed that municipality. I mean, it wasn't long ago that Nelson Mandela Bay was on the brink of financial bankruptcy, that service delivery had collapsed. And in the short space that my colleague Athol Trollip has been there have been tangible turnaround of that municipality in terms of title deeds given to people, in terms of the level of service delivery that's offered there in informal settlements, halving the packet system in there. So we remain proud of his contribution to governance in there.
So if he's that good, is it just down to politics, political play here?
We believe that whatever it is that those who are ganging up against him, hold into, it does not shake or minimize our confidence in him as a competent and capable mayor who has run a solid administration since his election.
All right, let's talk about what's happening in the Western Cape. I mean, you've got quite a few problems there at the moment, the arsonists on the rampage, the rise in gangsterism and drugs. What is going to be done to try and put out those flames?
What is happening in the Western Cape, I mean, with the issues that you've highlighted, I mean, one, the touching of the trains is clearly just more than a crime now. There seems to be a concerted effort to destroy public infrastructure in the Western Cape and to then paint the government that is in the Western Cape as some sort of administration that is responding in there. And I think this is the time when stuff like this happens, where the relationship between the different spheres of government becomes important, because it is not just about the people of Cape Town. It's about the safety of commuters. It's about the economy of the province, which contributes highly to the country, but it's also about fighting out crime in society. It cannot just be a municipal, in fact, it's not even a municipal function, it's the function of the South African Police Service, but we need all these spheres of government to work together, because we all care about safe environments, we all want our country to be safe, we want children to feel safe going to school, and those that are going to work to go so uninterrupted. I mean, we've had the taxi strike now, buses are being charged, so it is very difficult to not conclude that there is a concerted effort that is targeted at impacting negatively the government of the Western Cape. And this is not something new. I mean, a few years ago, there was a program of making that province ungovernable, led by the ANC Youth League leaders in the province, and we're able to defeat that.
Okay, Solly Malatsi, it's very good to have you with us talking about all of those issues at play at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Up next, will the day ever come when you pay for groceries not with rands but with Bitcoin? Are cryptocurrencies the future of money or just a short-term gimmick? We debate this on Tonight with Jane Dutton.
Scientists predict the first child that will live for 200 years has already been born. But what does that mean? Will they choose the same partner for life? How many kids will they have? Imagine meeting your great-great-great-great-great-grandchild. And how do you even plan a financial future for that long? Luckily, there's a group of people thinking about the answers.
I always had the feeling that he would kill her one day. I should never have kept it to myself.
If you don't do something about it, women will keep dying every day. Ask yourself, what did you do to stop violence against women?
This initiative is supported by Ituba, the national lottery operator.
Most people have heard of Bitcoin and Ethereum, but few of us are giving up our notes and using cryptocurrencies. But will that one day soon change? Cryptocurrencies are generated by computers. It's a bit like gaming tokens. The coins are verified and stored in a public ledger. It's available to anyone with internet access and allows transactions without a third party like a bank. So that means governments cannot control its production or use. Because of this, the currency's value is volatile, and many fear the hype will leave investors with nothing. So is cryptocurrency the cash of the future? That's what we're asking my guests. Tumelo Ramaphosa is a blockchain and cryptocurrency entrepreneur, and Sam Rowland is with Econometrics. Very good to have you both with us. Tumelo, I'm going to start off with you. How relevant are cryptocurrencies now?
Well, it depends on you. And at the end of the day, remember, I mean, even what drives price and demand is, investor and, public opinion. It's what you want and what you think and what you think it'll value itself. And, I think it's also opinion-based, and I believe right now, without human error and without politics, involved, and with just autonomous production of the currency, and I just believe that's better going forward.
But isn't that one of the problems, the fact that it's all about what you think and what you believe it might be? And I mean, there's not really anything that, I mean, how do you gauge its success other than looking at it shooting through the roof and then plummeting through the floor the next day?
Well, I mean, certainly. From a transaction point of view, we've seen Bitcoin and the price of Bitcoin take from very low when it's in its early stages to in the thousands of dollars, and now it's suddenly almost halved to below $7,000. From a transaction point of view, the pure currency, you have to wonder, well, what makes it different from the rand? If you're going to be withdrawing it from an ATM and spending it on your groceries, well, you might as well be using your rands. If you think of the transaction cost of having to go and find a Bitcoin ATM, you might as well use a normal ATM and use cash. I know it has a lot of sway with sort of liberalists and those who believe in a decentralized currency, but
sorry, I mean, there are cryptocurrency ATMs, and probably the difference is that you don't have to pay a fee if you're using a different ATM.
Well, I mean, there would be some transaction cost inherent in needing to withdraw Bitcoin or withdrawing rands or converting rands to Bitcoin. But I think the real value in Bitcoin and the real value we're going to see is not in the fundamental price of the currency. Because remember, Bitcoin isn't backed by, it doesn't have an intrinsic value. It's not backed by a government guarantee or gold, historically.
But why should it?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you're going to see something backed by supply and demand, there is the risk that Bitcoin could fall through the floor. What I'm arguing is that the real value lies in the transactional ability of, say, something like the blockchain.
Okay, I mean, that's what makes it, that's what gives it its credibility, doesn't it, the blockchain? And obviously I'm trying to talk really simplistically here, mainly for me, but I mean, that's where it gets its power from, doesn't it? What can be used with the blockchain?
Absolutely. As, we were just chatting just now, every cryptocurrency has a different purpose. So even with Bitcoin being the mother coin and then everything else being a derivative of that, such as Ethereum, I mean, even with Ethereum's got over 500 million transactions to date and going, but not all of those transactions are actually value-based. Some of those transactions are actually agreement-based. So yeah, I absolutely agree, but I think it's more the future of transaction and the way things can be done. I mean, with international payments, I mean, it's actually cheaper and better, faster to do payments with Bitcoin than any other, not even just Bitcoin itself, but cryptocurrency. And there's so many, there's over 1,700 cryptocurrencies that are listed, and those are just cryptocurrencies, and then over like 17,000 different tokens. So
and you can use these currencies
for different purposes. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, it's 40 million people who are actively using cryptocurrencies now. As even the founder of Binance, Chopin Zhao, said that right now, there's only 40 million people in the world using cryptocurrencies. And, we are able to generate between $200 to $800 billion within the whole total market cap. And even if you see with Bitcoin itself is not as dominant as it used to be, 4 or 5 years ago. It's reducing, but now what's happening is the alternate coins, all the other coins are growing in value and have different use cases.
Okay, let me bring in billionaire investor Warren Buffett. He's not on the line, but this is what he's going to say. He's definitely not a fan of the Bitcoin. He's previously described the currency as rat poison squared. In an interview with CNBC in May this year, Buffett says, in terms of cryptocurrencies generally, I can say with almost certainty that they will come to a bad ending. Of course, he's he's missed out on technologies before, hasn't he? And he's lived to regret that. Do you think he's wrong here in what he's saying here? Didn't invest in Google and Amazon, which is obviously a big mistake, but...
Sure. You know, the underlying principle of the currency remains the same as the underlying principle of a government-backed currency. What we've seen here is a dramatic rise in the price of Bitcoin, and the danger with that is that you possibly see things like Ponzi schemes appearing, like we saw with BTC Global, where people believe that Bitcoin is some magical sort of price that you can, this magical currency that's going to increase in perpetuity. And the danger with this is the people who do not have the know-how and the information invest in that in some sort of scheme, and we see a lot of fortunes being lost. So there needs to be a certain amount of regulation in that regard.
How big a scam attraction is the cryptocurrency? I mean, there obviously have been a few which have been revealed, but
look, I think that there's, in any sort of environment where a price of an asset suddenly starts to appear to be rising very rapidly, it leads many to, and it's often when you see things that people don't really understand the nature of. Rising price, people believe that easy money is to be made, and people believe that experts have somehow found a way to make money where others haven't. So there's a danger to that, and there's a danger that, you know, in a small market, like a developing market like South Africa, you run the risk of Ponzi schemes appearing. However, what is interesting, and I think you touched on it earlier, was in the cases where a currency has almost broken down, like we saw in Zimbabwe a couple of years ago, where they actually didn't have enough dollars around in the economy. The dollars were falling apart. The paper was falling apart. In that situation, Bitcoin as a transaction measure is very powerful because it allows you to transact from Zimbabwe to South Africa or abroad without going through the formal government channels, which we've seen.
Okay, let me quickly jump in. I just want to say that if anyone wants to call us or send us a tweet, whatever it is, they can jump in. Now, your father is the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, and I'm just wondering if he understands what this is all about. I mean, do you think it's a generational thing? Is he going to move us into a cryptocurrency nation?
I don't know. I don't know about that, but what I can tell you is that, look, cryptocurrency is the future. Everybody is learning.
But do you think it is a generational thing? Because I mean, it seems like the new way, isn't it?
Not really. I mean, you look at guys like Mike Novogratz. I mean, he's also, I mean, like old, you know, institutional investor, and he's now changed, and he's now seen the real value. And I think, you know, guys like Warren Buffett should spend more time trying to understand what it is. I mean, him and Bill Gates are very close, and Bill Gates is more computer scientist.
And he also poo-pooed it, didn't he?
Excuse me?
He also poo-pooed it.
No, he actually supports it. He actually thinks it's the future.
We have maybe a former quote before he was converted.
No, well, I mean, him and a lot of other people are convinced. And look, the whole Silicon Valley and, you know, Asia and, you know, developing countries, this is the future. I mean, as you said, with Zimbabwe, you look at what's happening in Venezuela. And, you know, even with them, you know, creating a currency, something that can be traded and, you know, and to eliminate all these problems. And even with them, when they get through their problems and everybody else gets through their problems, they'll actually have a way to try to actually look back at the records within the blockchain. And that's the real beauty of it, is to be able to store value for, you know, its time as value.
Okay, we've got a call, excuse me, on the line. Michael from East Rand. Go ahead, Michael.
Ma'am, I just want to say, when it comes to blockchain and cryptocurrency, this is going to change the world. There's no doubt about that. Warren Buffett was wrong, and everyone listens to Warren Buffett because he's old in the industry. But Warren Buffett was wrong several times. He is wrong this time again. He was wrong about Apple, and Apple is just a $1 trillion market cap. You understand? So you need to understand that this is going to change the world. In record, Island of Marshall is going to give a legit token. You understand? It's going to be a legit currency in Island Marshall, and that makes cryptocurrency is going to make cryptocurrency legit from there. You can buy anywhere from there because Marshall Island is part of UN. So this is going to change the world. There's no doubt about it. Thank you.
Okay, Michael. I mean, preaching to the converted there. I mean, do you think what he says has got legs?
Sure. I mean, so the point I'm trying to argue is buying Bitcoin for the sake of buying Bitcoin to try and sell it later on is fraught with danger. And I think this is what Mr. Buffett, Mr. Gates, and a lot of investors are saying. If you're trying to buy the asset to make money, it's the same as buying Forex and trying to make money on Forex. We know how difficult that is. It's the novel application of the technology. You know, the blockchain as a decentralized ledger, it makes it very difficult to crack, to break into the sort of transaction ledger. So it's a very secure way to see how transactions have occurred without government intervention. And that's, I mean, you know, another novel example of the technology being used is to watermark videos to prevent piracy. So you're able to track where the videos have been sent to along the transaction line. That's using cryptocurrency in a very novel way, and that, I think, is where there is a lot of opportunity for it within the greater Bitcoin cryptocurrency universe.
Okay, we'll talk more about the opportunities after the break, because we're going to continue the debate over Bitcoin when we come back. This is Tonight with Jane Dutton.
We don't accept the results that have been announced today.
Oh my goodness, this is going horribly wrong. To me, in my limited experience, this sounds like automatic fire.
All the news, all the time. This is ENCA.
Coming up on this week's Mags on Media, how a beer brand won the Digital World Cup, how Gauteng's biggest radio station hits the jackpot with its latest content offering, and taking the music video market into an entirely new paradigm. Mags on Media, leading the communications debate only on ENCA.
Hello again. We're debating the future of finance with Tumelo Ramaphosa and Sam Rowland. And we have a caller on the line from Limpopo. Nick, go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I just want to ask, or rather to get advice regarding the Zimbabwe situation at the moment. And what will be their advice for those who are looking to get involved in this cryptocurrency in terms of investment-wise or getting involved in it, since they were having a crisis already in Zimbabwe of cash? What will be the advice for Zimbabwe right now?
Thank you.
You say what would be the way forward?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, it depends. Look, I mean, at any, every investor has a certain appetite, what they're willing to lose, what they, and as also have institutional education to invest into, so you also got to know what you're doing. I mean, you got to, and look, with where cryptocurrencies originate from 30 years ago, and cryptography itself being over 70 years ago, but only now within the past 8 years, we've actually only been able to have the software to be able to access it properly, to access it within a safer way. So, and I mean, even we're talking about what's happening in Zimbabwe. I mean, this demand and supply of money there has been changed now with Bitcoin. It's created a lot of solutions, but not just Bitcoin itself, but also cryptocurrencies going forward. And look, what the caller said when Nick said is he was asking what level. I mean, it depends. What level do you want to get involved in?
And I guess it's what's tried and tested now, isn't it, going forward? I mean, if you look at the UN, their World Food Programme is using it. They send money to refugees, and they're using Ethereum because they can send it to apps on mobile phones. That's right. So that will make quite a dramatic impact for several reasons, I guess, because you get rid of corruption. Yeah. There's no middleman there, and you can reach far-flung places.
Certainly. I mean, in a continent like Africa, where there is a large rural population. I mean, we saw the success of M-Pesa in Kenya, something like that, where you have mobile money able to be transacted instantly. There's a huge amount of power in that. And with the blockchain, moving, let's say, food and aid into Africa, being able to use that and track that, really it takes down the opportunities corruption to a very small level. If I can also answer your caller, if he's looking to invest in cryptocurrencies or Bitcoin, the danger and the advice I would say is, don't try and invest to make money off the price of Bitcoin, because you don't really know where it's going. It's driven by demand and supply. If you're wanting to really make a long-term impact, you want to invest in the technologies using Bitcoin, like using it to track movies, using it to track wildlife transactions. That's really where the power lies.
Yes, because that's been...
And the associated industries, and even, as my fellow panelists said, the technology to mine and transact Bitcoin, it's a huge amount of computing power. We need to rethink how we design computers to be able to handle these complex calculations, I would say, and there maybe is an opportunity for that as well.
Should we bring in John from Johannesburg on the line? Go ahead, John.
Hi. Yeah, my question is very simple. Hi.
No, go ahead, John.
Hello?
Hi, John. We can hear you. Go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah, my question is very simple. There are so many scams in South Africa relating to bitcoins and so on. How can that be stopped, or how people should look at to make sure that is genuine?
Thank you for that. I mean, go for it.
It's genuine.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that it's genuine?
Yes.
Well, simple. I mean, every wallet, every transaction you can actually track. So maybe if you take that and start with that, you can copy paste it into the blockchain and see if that's real. But look, it is a risk. I mean, look at we're only talking about the smallest market cap of money and money supply. I mean, we're looking at 200 to what, $700 billion in total market cap, wherever the price is and wherever demand supply for the total currencies, not just Bitcoin itself, but all 1,700. And what I'm trying to say is that when you look at even stock markets, I mean, you look at the global stock market is over $79 trillion, $100 trillion. And, you know, no one's looking into what's happening everywhere there. And even
Again, what about hackers then? Because they are ever present.
I mean, look at what money. I mean, I can give you $10,000 right now, 10,000 right now. I don't know what you're going to do with it. No one knows what we did. And the difference is that, like, okay, well, with hacking, yes, it does happen. And even with being robbed, like, you can get robbed. Like, your bank account can get hacked.
But isn't digital security becoming more of a problem now? Isn't it harder to control, to police?
Well, not really. You see, in the initiation, maybe it was because there were very few people who knew what to do with it. I mean, you know, back in the day, Bitcoin was used on Silk Road, to transact weapons and between terrorists and everything. That was where, yes, that's where it originates from. But look at where also, money comes from. Look at where all these forms of transaction come from. And even with Ponzi scheme, you look at guys like Bernie Madoff. Look what they did with real money, with fiat.
Okay, so where's regulation now?
Well, I mean, I think eventually we are going to see some sort of regulation.
That'll give people more confidence as well.
I think, in the context of South Africa, and the difficulty is you have a population, and especially in the rural areas, that doesn't necessarily understand the complexities of the cryptocurrency world and the universe. And I admit I probably don't understand it nearly as well as you do. The danger with that is you have an asset, and this we've seen many times around the world every few years, a new asset that not really anyone understands, promising very big returns, and maybe the rural population doesn't have access to the technology to check these transactions. And that's where Ponzi schemers will target. And you really have to just say, well, what can you trust or what can't you? The adage just goes, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
It usually is.
Yeah.
And banks, what role do they have in what's going on here? Do you think if they were to embrace cryptocurrency, I don't see why they would, because banks make money off us making transactions, right? In some
Good question. And, I mean, look, I'm a partner in an exchange, chankura.com. And look, we work tightly with banks, and we originate from a bank, from RMB and Black Alpha Code. And even with us is that we had to work closely with regulations, with everything that's happening. But remember, at the end of the day, it's like when I have Bitcoin, when I want to use them in another way, I can actually send them, and I must send them to a bank account. So the bank themselves can't just say, look, I don't want the money. You want the money because I need to spend that money. And with me doing other transactions with a card, which are actually even more than even Bitcoin. And I mean, you look what's happened, last year, there were over 700,000 millionaires that America realized, and that's what also just, was overwhelming for SEC. But with different ways, I mean, with us, with the exchange, we have anti-money laundering laws, we have know your customer with ID. So even with us, we save ourselves with every transaction that's made with our exchange. So, and we have to, we're based in San Francisco, and here in South Africa, we're a global exchange, and we have to abide by SEC.
There are rules. So can I bring in George from Bloemfontein? George, go ahead.
Hello. I would like to know what actually is a Bitcoin. It's claimed that it's a currency. But if it's a currency, what underpins its value? A rand is underpinned by a certain amount of gold. What underpins the value of the Bitcoin? Or is it just a huge electronic wallet in an electronic cloud that facilitates local and international transactions. The two aspects of it are unclear to me.
All right, good question.
Well, look, what is a Bitcoin? A Bitcoin is it's a digital currency. I mean, it's cryptographic computer code. It's mined. It's made by other computers around the world, and it actually has a reference and a record to every single one that's made, that's transacted, that's sent to anywhere, everywhere. You can actually try.
You can't see it. You can't hold it.
You can't see it. You can't hold it. But I mean, it's better. Look. I mean, I don't want to say that it's better than fiat, but it's more real than what the rand and what the dollar are based on. I mean, when the dollar detached itself from the gold value in the 1970s, that was, we don't, it's the whole belief, and that is also controlled by politics and, global economic factors, and how countries trade between each other, forex. So, with Bitcoin it's different. It's opinion related,
But how do you value it? How do you go, I mean, you look at Ethereum now, I don't know what the price is today, but you look at it and go, okay, well, that's a good price for Ethereum, I'm going to jump in, or it's way over price.
So, I mean, South Africa has not been backed by gold, and the world hasn't been backed by gold for a very long time, as you mentioned. This is an inherent danger in the currency, and it's an inherent danger in any sort of digital currency. The rand is backed by the promise the government gives it that it has value, and that the government will protect the value of the rand, and that gives it a sort of medium and a medium of transaction. The difficulty that I think with Bitcoin and the associated cryptocurrencies is, if we were to see a huge crash, and we are seeing that, we are seeing a lot more volatility, and I mean, we've seen it, the price drop dramatically, is what will support the value of the currency other than supply and demand? What will guarantee the value of the currency if there was no demand is an interesting point to make. Yeah. And that's always the difficulty with these cryptocurrencies. And we've seen the general acceptability has been very good, but there is a danger that the price will drop significantly. I mean, if you think very long ago, the Dutch tulip bubble, where tulips were suddenly given this amazing sort of value, but they were, I mean, maybe I don't appreciate, but they were flowers. And eventually the price of tulips dropped, and they just kept dropping and kept dropping because there was nothing to guarantee the price other than supply and demand. And when demand fell, that is where the sort of floor fell out. So,
okay, so we could be seeing the same thing here, but I understand.
There is a risk.
Peter from Durban is on the line. Go ahead, Peter. Hello, Peter, can you hear me? Oh, I think we've lost Peter. How do we protect ourselves then, if we're going to go in and take the leap? How do you protect yourself when you go in?
Well, I mean, there's various ways. Look, I mean, there's like buying. You buy an exchange. You can you also buy from an ATM. We've got ATMs now in South Africa and around the world. And the best way, I would say, is through cold storage, and you can actually remove your cryptocurrencies off an exchange onto a USB. But also at the same time, I mean, passwords, keeping passwords, keeping passwords off your computer, keeping on a more physical storage device. Those are, the safest ways of being protected from being hacked. And, even with us on exchange, we use artificial intelligence to authorize every transaction, and even that itself is a blockchain activity.
Okay, Peter's back on the line. Glad to get you back, Peter. Go ahead. Peter, what's your question?
Hello. Oh, hi. I actually have seen the Bitcoin's been used in dubious transactions and could very well be used in money laundering. Don't you think that the IMF would negate things as things in international transactions like this?
Look, I don't think the total focus of Bitcoin is to do money laundering. I mean, if the total focus of money itself is to do, crime, I don't think I don't think everybody's trying to do that. But yes, there have been some people, and at the end of the day, it depends what you want to do with it. The beauty with Bitcoin is, it's peer-to-peer. So it's what we decide. It's decentralized and it's more democratized in globally. What we as
and
people
it's
want
maintained
to
on a ledger. Is that right?
Absolutely.
I think what we're forgetting here is that the rand and other currencies are just
not
as
exactly. So as now, I could give you 10 rand. how do
More
you
than
know?
athletes,
Everyone knows on TV, but
Yeah.
if I give you off air, but then what? No one knows it happened. But if I give you 10 Rand on the blockchain, we know it happened.
Yeah.
And I just believe going forward, you know, we need this paper trail.
And do you think there needs to be more success stories? I was going to read you a little comment from Richard Branson. We know that he really supports it and he likes to use it. Do you think if people are better educated on how Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies can be used, that there will be more of a future? So examples where it is well used in looking at, you know, the environment, or you know, wiping out corruption because you take out the middleman. Do you think then it has a longevity to it?
Well, certainly. I think people need to then shift the focus away from the price and trying to trade and make money off the currency itself. You want to see it used for things like reforming and tracking healthcare, tracking food, tracking, you know, environmental transactions, things like carbon credits. That's where the real power and the real staying power of the technology lies, and developing it around the blockchain, I believe. But trying to focus on it as making money off a price that's shifting is short-lived, I would say.
Tamela Ramaphosa and Sam Rowland, thank you very much. That was a great chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Sure, tough questions.
What would you like to pay for your room tonight? 2,050, 1,020 or 800 Rand. It's the same room with the same service, just different prices. It's really up to you. Well, nobody ever asks you this at the hotel reception, do they? But this is exactly what Trivago does for you. Trivago gives you a variety of options by showing you prices from more than 200 different websites and apps. Trivago just compares. The choice is up to you. Hotel Trivago.
Welcome back. It is just after 9 p.m. and we'll be heading off to Washington in a moment to get the latest fallout from Trump's tweets. But first, let's check in with Shahan for the day's news. Shahan.
All right, thanks for that, Jane. Appreciate it. And we start with breaking news. The taxi strike in the Western Cape has been called off. ENCA has learned that the ANC in the province intervened. Now, earlier, many commuters were left stranded and 2 buses and a truck were torched in Khayelitsha. We'll have more details on this story on NewsHour at 10. The Cooperative Governance Ministry is on a drive to fix failing municipalities. A team of technical experts has been deployed to 55 municipalities. They'll help with infrastructure, management and other problems.
Do not look at the camera. The situation in the country has been such that only 55 municipalities out of 257 had engineers leading their technical divisions. I made a commitment that COGTA would, through our implementing agent, the Municipal Infrastructure Support Agent, MISA, urgently support 55 struggling municipalities to spend their infrastructure allocation. I said we would deploy district technical support teams in the affected municipalities. We have established the district technical support teams and have appointed engineers and town planners who have been deployed into the municipalities in the 9 provinces.
And the Kgokha municipality is implementing water cuts in drought-stricken parts of the Eastern Cape. Levels at the local dam has dropped to below 7%. Some residents could be left without water if there's no rainfall in the next 3 months. Farmers say their water allocation has been cut by 80%.
We as black farmers now, it's even getting worse because you must borrow money from the bank to do that, and the cost of that, it's almost 1,000 a meter to dig a borehole. So it's not so easy for us, and I mean you need a security to get a loan from the bank. Yeah, but we've tried different sources.
Well, those are the headlines. Back to Jane.
Thank you, Shahan. US President Donald Trump is still tweeting his way into trouble. A weekend of what many would call worrying tweets began Friday night. The president blasted a tweet attacking NBA superstar LeBron James and a well-known African-American news anchor. Then on Sunday, a tweet Trump sent out may land him and his son huge legal problems. To break all this down, I'm joined by our US correspondent Simon Marks in Washington. Simon, it's good to see you again. I'm going to talk to you about the tweets, and I'm going to read them out. And I'm going to start off first with Trump's tweet about LeBron James. He obviously is a very popular man, is involved in setting up schools for poor kids. He says LeBron James was just interviewed by the dumbest man on television, Don Lemon. He made LeBron look smart, which isn't easy to do. I like Mike. I mean, what was he thinking when he wrote that? And how racist is this being seen?
Well, I mean, it certainly is being seen as racist, given that LeBron James and Don Lemon, the anchor at CNN who was interviewing him, are both African Americans. And there are many people here who say Donald Trump wouldn't say things like that about people who were white. But the bigger issue is that, to put all of this into its context, that tweet was published just as Donald Trump was beginning a 10-day holiday at his golf resort in Bedminster, New Jersey, just up in the New York area north of us here in Washington, D.C. And when Donald Trump is on holiday, there is no space in the United States more dangerous than the space between him and any available telephone or computer from which he can start firing out messages on Twitter. So this was just the first in a whole series of angry messages that poured forth from the American president all over the weekend and through into Monday here in the United States, with several more days of them lying ahead. And critics of President Trump say, just hang on a moment here. LeBron James has done more through the educational efforts that he's been making with inner city and underprivileged children, many of them, of course, children of minority parents, to try and improve the lives of those infants than the Trump administration has done, given that it, over the last few weeks, has been accused of ripping children out of the arms of their parents who happen to be illegal immigrants. And one of the people advancing the argument that LeBron James has been doing some very interesting work in the field of education with underprivileged and minority children is none other than Melania Trump, the First Lady of the United States, married to Donald Trump. She took to Twitter after that tweet from Donald Trump about LeBron James and defended what he had been doing and said that she would like to visit his project to understand more about what he's been achieving. So further evidence in all of this of the marital strain between President Trump and Melania Trump inside the White House, but also further evidence that the president is ready to discuss anything that he likes, anything that he thinks about talking about on Twitter at the drop of a hat, without necessarily thinking through all of the implications of what he's saying.
Now, LeBron James responded. He said he doesn't understand the power that he has for being the leader of this beautiful country. He doesn't understand how many kids, no matter their race, look up to the President of the United States for guidance, for leadership, for words of encouragement. He doesn't understand that. So he's probably got a good point there, but I'm just wondering what the political fallout is of making this sort of comment. I should imagine that Donald Trump's base quite likes it.
Well, I mean, I think the point is worth making, Jane, that what appears to have stuck in Donald Trump's craw was an exchange between LeBron James and Don Lemon, in which Don Lemon said to him, if you could sit down across the dinner table from President Donald Trump, what would you like to tell him? And LeBron James responded and said, I will never sit down across a dinner table from Donald Trump. He indicated that he had absolutely no desire to find himself in the immediate orbit or proximity of the American president. So that appears to have been the issue that really irritated President Donald Trump politically. It's very hard to know how all of this plays out, because on the one hand, you can sit here on the liberal east coast of the United States. I was out in San Francisco last week, the liberal west coast of the United States, and you can encounter all sorts of people who are absolutely horrified by the kind of things that President Trump says on Twitter. And yet, if you look at his approval poll rating, the Gallup organization just a few days ago, record high level since Donald Trump has been president at 40% approval rating. Now, that doesn't sound like it's very much, because it suggests that a majority of Americans still disapprove of what he's doing as president. But with crucial midterm elections taking place this November, control of the United States Congress at stake, that 40% may be enough to defend enough Republican seats all over the country that the Republican Party ends up maintaining control of both houses of Congress. We will have to see.
We shall have to see indeed. Let's talk about another intriguing tweet. He says, fake news, this was on Sunday. He said, fake news reporting a complete fabrication, that I am concerned about the meeting my wonderful son, Donald, had in Trump Tower. This was a meeting to get information on an opponent, totally legal and done all the time in politics, and it went nowhere. I did not know about it. Simon, that could be pretty dangerous legally, right?
Well, what is so important about that tweet, Jane, is where he said that this was a meeting to gather information about a political opponent. In other words, to gather information about Hillary Clinton. We'd all long surmised that that was what the meeting between Donald Trump Jr. and this Russian lawyer, who we now know has pretty good ties with President Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin, everyone here had surmised that that is what the meeting was all about. But the White House had denied it. They had insisted that the meeting was completely innocent. It was a conversation all about adoption policy, the Russian government having prevented American parents from adopting Russian orphans a couple of years ago. And the White House had always said this was simply a briefing about that policy and a discussion about where that policy might head in the months after the election. Now, suddenly, there's Donald Trump saying, well, hang on a second, actually, it really was a meeting designed to gather information about a political opponent, obviously Hillary Clinton. And that is going to be grist to the mill for Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor here in Washington, D.C., who is investigating ties between Donald Trump's presidential campaign and the Russians, and now investigating ties between Donald Trump's son and the Russians. And we know that within the last few weeks, Robert Mueller's inquiry has also started taking a very close look at Donald Trump's Twitter account. So by taking to Twitter there on Saturday, trying to defend his son, he may actually only have created a greater degree of legal jeopardy for Donald Trump Jr. Than he managed to head off.
And Simon, you really got to wonder why he does this, why he needs to fire off his tweets. The Chief of Staff, John Kelly, he was supposed to stop this. I mean, if his staff can't stop this, I mean, where does that leave that relationship and the desire to behave this way?
Jane, I am old enough to remember when Donald Trump first entered the White House, and we all wondered whether he was still even going to use Twitter. That's how far we've come. It's an absolutely essential, elemental part of his communication strategy. And it's a communication strategy that he believes allows him to rise above what he would refer to as the fake news media that is engaged in a rigged witch hunt against him. It also allows him to fire up his base, and that's really what this is all about. It's about, as he said in a speech the other day, saying to his base, what you're seeing and hearing on America's television news networks is not real. What I tell you is the real truth about the situation that I am encountering. So it allows him to create his own version of reality. Remember, this is a White House that used to tell us that there was such a thing as an alternative fact. Often Donald Trump uses his Twitter account to put those alternative facts out there. They go straight into the hands of 53-odd million people who are now subscribed to his Twitter account. The danger in all of this is that they are official presidential statements, and he can say things on there that ultimately get him into all sorts of trouble. And that's why it is interesting that Robert Mueller, the special prosecutor, is now looking into President Trump's tweets. And in the event that President Trump finds himself being interviewed by the special prosecutor, some of the things he said on Twitter may well come back to haunt him.
This is going to be a long holiday, isn't it? Thanks a lot for that, Simon Marks. Well, while Zimbabwe enters a new era, a new book sheds light on the rule of Robert Mugabe. These Bones Will Rise Again explores his rise and demise. The author joins me here on the show. Coming up, this is Tonight with Jane Dutton.
My name is Tombozuko. Gladys Ndamase. I stay here at Mkhalanga, in Kangi. Umthonjana is the center that caters for the elderly and provide a platform for them to encourage active aging, so that now there's still value in them, because now when they sit at home, they lose value. We do exercises for the elderly, golden games to keep them active. We've got also music, and then we do handcraft. You bring a blessing for yourself, for your future, and for your own children when you care for the elderly. You are leaving a legacy for your generation.
These are South African heroes.
Well, up next, we'll talk to Panashe Chigumadzi. Her new book chronicles the presidency of Robert Mugabe. But first, let's see what's in store for 9:30. Tonight's Let's Have It Out guest presenter is Gogo Dineo Ntlansi, a traditional healer. And she joins me now for a preview. And you said you were feeling a little nervous.
I was, I think, because I've never hosted a show. I mean, I've always been invited as a guest. So tonight, I'm actually hosting a guest. So it's a bit nerve-wracking, but I'm also excited. Because...
And, yeah, what are you going to be talking about?
We're going to be talking really around understanding how traditional healing works, the different types, the different methods. And this is a refreshing conversation, because normally when we come into spaces like that, what happens is that we need to account for what has went wrong. But right now, we're really trying to re-educate people to understand how the practice works, because it's quite it's multifaceted in the way that in which it operates.
And it's still incredibly important, isn't it? I mean, and has it been able to modernize now? Is that what's happening with traditional medicine? Is it getting a nice balance with current medicine and traditions?
Well, it's interesting, because sometimes I'm very skeptical of the word modernize, because modernize can speak to us, letting go of the essences of the practice to trying to accommodate westernization, because who's modern? In what views are we looking at modern? And that's what we're really discussing. When we say modernize African, healing, are we talking of modernizing it within the system in which it doesn't fit in? Or are we speaking of modern in terms of how does it serve us in these times? And what is relevant about the practice. So that's what we're really discussing.
Wonderful to have you on.
Thank you so much.
On set, and good luck for your show.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to be coming back after the break.
We're going to wipe the floor with them. And you're going to pay my costs for the next 20 years.
I'll see you in court. You and who?
You don't want to end up in court. But when you do, let Clientele Legal tackle your court appearance for you. We have a nationwide panel of attorneys standing by to assist you. SMS COVER to 42770 and we'll call you back.
Look. Have you got your sticker yet? What type of sticker has a hole now?
How got your sticker yet?
Be an everyday hero. Wie is elke dag gejuicht? With persons with disabilities. Get your Casual Day sticker now!
Visit casualday.coza and join us on Friday the 7th of September for Casual Day.
Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has a huge task ahead of him. He is the first democratically elected president there in 4 decades. But his rise was only possible because of Robert Mugabe's fall. These Bones Will Rise Again explores the events leading up to the coup that brought Mugabe's 37 years of power to an abrupt end. Tonight we sit down with the author Panashe Chigomatsi. Very good to have you with us.
Fantastic.
So it's more than chronicling what happened here. You know, I think he's a sort of secondary story in this book, isn't he?
No, definitely. I think for me, in writing this book, which was prompted, of course, by the coup, not a coup, that had happened in November last year, it was to go back in history to understand these 2 weeks, to understand Zimbabwe outside of the figure of Mugabe's Zimbabwe. I think that was incredibly important, particularly right now, as we see many of these events unfolding, we're needing to understand Zimbabwe outside of the figure of one man. And the way in which I do this is to go back in history by focusing on two women, namely my late grandmother, who passed away a few weeks before the coup, not a coup, happened, as well as the figure of Mbuya Nehanda, who is perhaps the most famous person in Zimbabwe's liberation history. And the reason that I do this is because the military was very deliberate in crafting the narrative or the history of that moment, and they declared that moment Operation Restore Legacy, in square brackets would say of the liberation struggle. So essentially I was interested in what is liberation according to ZANU-PF, according to the state, and they're very deliberate in crafting a ZANU-PF centric idea of liberation, and I wanted to understand what liberation has meant to me, particularly as a so-called born free both of South Africa and of Zimbabwe.
And do you feel liberated?
What is liberation? I think for me the most important thing was to interrogate why it is that we keep coming back to this idea of being a born free, that if you're born at a particular point in history, you know, that erases everything that has happened before you. And particularly as well, it's the idea that liberation or the liberation struggle is supposedly not important for me. And this is important particularly in Zimbabwe, where, for example, someone like Nelson Chamisa, who is, he was born in 1978, very often the rhetoric is that Mfana cannot rule right now in this moment because he never held a gun. This is something that also was said about Morgan Tsvangirai, that he never held a gun, so he cannot rule. So this idea in South Africa, we understand it, of struggle credentials.
Yeah, so and it's so entrenched.
It's definitely entrenched about, you know, who owns history in particular. There was a debate with Chris Mchangwa, who's the head of the War Veterans Association. And the first thing that he said was ZANU-PF is the party of history. And so this book really is an interrogation of Zimbabwe's history, because history is used and abused to exclude people and include people from this idea that some people are more Zimbabwean than others. And that's why it was important for me to claim ownership of this liberation struggle, so that I'm not, I can't be disenfranchised of my voice within
Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe.
And do you feel that because you live outside the country? I mean, does that
have
an impact, do you think?
I think for me, I do see myself as someone who's very much of the region, and as part of the book, it is understanding how intertwined the politics between Zimbabwe and South Africa are. Even just, I mean, very often people look at my surname and ask me, are you Venda, are you Tsonga, that kind of thing. But I think definitely as the diaspora, for example, we're not able to vote. There is the way in which we're excluded. Of course, many other groups are excluded in Zimbabwe. For example, Ndebele people, a minority, they've gone through the trustee of Gukurahundi, for example, and many other ways in which people continue to be disenfranchised, again with this idea that some people are more Zimbabwean than others. So that was why it was really important to understand this history, not as a way to shackle myself, but rather to free myself and be able to take claim of my space within Zimbabwe, and hopefully other people can do the same kind of thing.
Tell me about the name of your book, These Bones Will Rise Again.
So These Bones Will Rise Again comes from the famous dying words of Mbuya Nehanda, who is an anti-colonial heroine. She was a spirit medium in the same way that you have Dalai Lama is not really called, his name is not actually Dalai Lama, it's the name of a spirit that has existed for many, many years. And anyway, this spirit medium was instrumental in the first one of the first anti-colonial uprisings of 1896 to 1897. And she was executed for this role. And the thing that she said was, "My bones will rise again," just before she passed on. And these words were used as inspiration within what we call the Second Chimurenga, which is the liberation war of the 1970s. So this is to say, if I'm interrogating what is liberation to me, and particularly saying that this is about an intergenerational struggle, the idea of bones that go into the earth and rise again was a very striking metaphor for me.
Robert Mugabe made a few comments ahead of casting his vote.
Yes.
And we're going to listen to the one that he said very briefly. I just want to get your response from that.
I have also said, Imam Juru and my coupe don't offer very much. So there is Chamisa left.
I know it's a side bit to your story, but an important one. When you heard something like that, I mean, what went through your mind?
Again, it was really important with this book not to focus on Mugabe, because you realize that sentiments like that, unfortunately, are not unusual. There was a lot of the dismissal of women candidates. Of the 23 presidential candidates this election, there were only 4 women candidates. And you'll see that kind of marginalization of women across the board, across all parties. So Thokozani Kupe, who he's talking about, for example, was someone who many expected to ascend after Trangirai passed away, but at his funeral, she was chased by the supporters of Chamisa, called a whore, for example, and even threatened. They threatened to burn down the hut that she had to hide in. Many other women have had to be called this word whore, and it's something that keeps on being thrown around. People like Grace Mugabe, we're not defending her as a political figure, but it's interesting that whenever women act independently of male control, the first word that is often thrown at people is prostitute or whore. And part of the history that I do go through in this book is understanding how this word has been quite pervasive in Zimbabwe's nationalist politics. We can go back to 1956, where there were the Carter House Hospital, the Carter House rapes of women who had not heeded the bus boycotts of that year. And the excuse that was given, or the justification that was given by many of the nationalists at the time, was that these were prostitutes who could afford the bus fares because they were actually, they had actually been domestic workers, they were secretaries working in town. But the idea that a woman could do something for herself, the only way she could do that was to be a prostitute. And there's nothing wrong with that work, but I think in this particular context, it is a way to deride women. And that's again why it was important to understand Zimbabwe outside of the figure of Mugabe, so that we can see that there's some of these pervasive issues around our very patriarchal and often very gun-centric politics that we need to deal with if we're going to have a different kind of Zimbabwe.
Tandy Newton, it's on her book list, one of her favorites. I mean, so you're really getting traction internationally. I mean, how does that make you feel? And tell us a little bit more about where you can find your book. And
well, literally, when I saw the tweet from Tandy Newton, I said, "Someone, please balance me." I was really excited. Is this real? Exactly, because of course this is something that is very specific to Zimbabwe, but of course I think has a lot of universal themes and understandings around questions of history, particularly the histories of women, and particularly the histories of black women.
Did I say Chigamutsi? I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Run out of time. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's our show for tonight with Jane Dutton. Let's have